Today in Final Fantasy, we get the Black Adventureland, which is probably the best Adventureland, a new light legend that might finally make Circle of Loyalty playable, and our exclusive MTG Goldfish preview card. Let's break it down. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron-Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Final Fantasy spoilers. So we've reached the start of our third and final week of spoilers, and I know it's a holiday here in the US, but spoilers never stop. And we got some cool cards to talk about today, including our exclusive Goldfish preview card, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking spicy new cards. Before we do, a couple of quick reminders. First, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Second, keep up on all the latest previews throughout the day. You should head on over to MTGpreviews.com. Anyway, let's talk some Final Fantasy. First up today, we get our Black Adventureland, and I'm pretty sure this is the best one of the entire cycle, in Midgar city of Mako, which is apparently a city full of sharks, I think. Anyway, it's land side, enter step, make black mana. It's spell side, Rector Raid, 3-mana sorcery. You may sack an artifact or creature. If you do, you draw 2 cards. Then of course it goes to exile, you can play the land side. So Midgar, this compares to Costly Plunder, Deadly Dispute, probably the best of this effect. We also have Fanatical Offering in Standard. So obviously there's some downsides here. Midgar, 1 more mana, which that's not really the end of the world. The biggest deal is it is sorcery speed, and if you see these cards played, a lot of times it's like in response to a removal spell, I cast my Deadly Dispute and sack my thing. On your end step, I cast my Fanatical Offering, sack a thing, draw some cards, get the map token. You're not going to be able to do that with Midgar. On the other hand, there is some sneaky upside to this wording. If you look at all the other versions of this effect, they all say is an additional cost to cast this spell, sack the artifact or the creature. Midgar's worded differently. It says you may sack an artifact or creature. If you do, you draw 2 cards. So how this works in practice is you don't have to sack the thing when you cast Midgar. You cast it, once it resolves, then you can sacrifice the thing. The upside of this is you kind of get to choose after you know the spell's going to resolve. The downside is, in theory, if you only had like 1 creature on the battlefield, you could cast Midgar, in response your opponent could kill it, you wouldn't get to draw the cards, although it would still go to exile, which I think is why Wizards worded it this way, is to make sure it's going to go to exile no matter what, and you're going to be able to get the land side of it. So what do we do with Midgar? I think the most obvious home is some sort of sacrifice deck. We got Sephiroth coming to Standard, for example. They really want you to be sacrificing things. I'm really hyped for the possibility of maybe some sort of Aristocrats deck making it in Standard, thanks to Midgar, thanks to Sephiroth. So Midgar's going to be perfect there. We've also seen some like Bart Race the Past decks where you just want to like play a bunch of cheap creatures, sacrifice them, get them in the graveyard, get them all back with Raise the Past. Midgar also seems really solid there. I mean, in Standard, the floor of this card is just very high. The opportunity cost of playing a land that comes into play tapped, not especially devastating, maybe more so in this Standard than others, because the Standard is very fast, but playing a tap land, not the end of the world in Standard. So I think there's a lot of decks that could take advantage of this. Maybe even like, think of Golgari Midrange. Golgari Midrange, not a sacrifice deck at all, but you're playing Mosswood Red Knight, which is a pretty good thing to sack, because you can always cast it from the graveyard to draw more cards and then get it back on the battlefield. You got stuff like Sentinels of the Nameless City making map tokens that you can sack. So I could see Golgari playing like 1 or 2 of these just as another way to grind out some value, draw some extra cards. Once you get back to Pioneer, I think this could show up in like the Mayhem Devil Cauldron familiar decks. We'll have to wait and see. Once you get back to older formats, the cost of playing a tap land does go up because those formats are just more powerful, more efficient. So having to lose a mana for a turn by playing a tap land does kind of hurt, but it fits the theme of something like the Rakdos Sack deck really, really well. In Modern, that's where I'm pretty sure this card's just going to be too slow. Although, if you had some sort of like Sack Zombie deck with Gravecrawler, even Yawgmoth, I think the effect would be fine there, but I think Modern is just too fast for it. 3 mana sorcery speed, land that enters tap style Adventureland. The other place this card is going to be absolutely great is in basically any sacrifice commander deck. So if you're playing Korvald or Camilla or Tisa Karlov or Elenda or Braids, I think you play this pretty much every time. Obviously, in Braids, it's super easy to play this card because if you're playing mono black, you just have tons of room to play these utility lands. It gets a little tougher if you're playing like Korvald, the 3-color deck, but I still think it's going to be worth it a lot of the time in decks like that. The other place I think this card can be good is just in mono black. So in mono black, I I don't think I'd play it in every deck because not every deck is going to have an artifact or creature I want to sacrifice. But even if I'm not an aristocrat deck or a sack deck, if I'm playing a mono black commander that maybe makes tokens like Maronar or Gisa or Endrickshar, I think this card's just really good. Like, you sack a random token that you make, you draw a couple cards, you still get your land drop. So Midgar, I think this card should be really good in Standard. I think it's got a chance in Pioneer. Modern, I'm a little bit skeptical. If it was instant speed, or if the land entered untapped, then I think this could be a Modern, or maybe even a Legacy card. But it's sorcery speed, and when the land being tapped, I'm guessing it's probably too low. And then in Commander, any sort of Aristocrat deck, and even just some Mono Black decks, are going to want Midgar. The card is really, really good. We also got an interesting new Human Noble Knight legend in Dion Bahamut's Dominant, which flips into Bahamut, Warden of Light. So the front side, a 3-mana 3/3, Human Knight Noble, it's a legendary creature. During your turn, it and other knights you control have flying. When it enters, you make a 2/2 White Knight creature token. So technically, for 4 mana, you're getting a 3/3 and a 2/2, and during your turn, they each have flying. So in a weird way, you're getting a 5/5 flyer for 4, almost split across 2 bodies. And then you can pay 6, exile it, return it to the battlefield, transform under its owner's control only as a sorcery, is Bahamut, Warden of Light. So the backside, a 5/5 flyer. So actually the same amount of power as the front side. First 2 lore counters, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until end of turn. Last lore counter, destroy a permanent, exile it, return it to the battlefield face up, then you'll get another knight token, you get Dion again. So Dion, this card actually really intrigues me. If you're looking for comparisons, there's not a great one. It's kind of like Gallant Cavalry, but like epically upgraded. It is so much better that it's kind of unfair to Dion to even compare it to Gallant Cavalry. You're getting way more abilities, you're getting a backside, you're getting better stats. It also kind of reminds me of On the Wings of Gold, just giving all of your knights flying during your turn. That is the most appealing part of this ability. If you look at this card, 5 power and toughness for 4 mana is good, and then sending potentially your entire team to the air during your turn is a really, really scary way to close out the game. The backside of the card, and I will say, in Standard, I don't think you're really ever getting the backside of this card. Like 6 mana and doing it at sorcery speed is just a really big ask. Yes, I'm sure like 5% of the time it'll happen or something, but really in Standard, I'm playing it for the front side. But if you do get to the backside, the first 2 lore counters are kind of Elspeth's 0 ability. It doesn't last through your opponent's turns, but it's close enough that you're like giving your team flying, you're pumping it, getting in a ton of damage. And then you get a Vindicate. It is cute that it's technically land destruction. I guess Wizards figured for 10 total mana and having to dodge removal and flipping it at sorcery speed and waiting 3 turns after you flip it, that maybe it would be safe enough to be able to blow up any permanent and not any non-land permanent. So you do get a Vindicate eventually. It's just a really slow, expensive Vindicate. So what do we do with this card? So the obvious home for this card is some sort of Knight deck, and we do have a lot of Knight synergies left over from when we went to Dominaria almost 3 years ago now. The downside is all these cards are rotating in just a couple of months this summer. But for the short term, we can play like a Knight tribal deck with Marshal Azelfir as a lord. You got Invasion of Phyrexia to make a ton of knights, eventually flip into the fairy that wants knights on the battlefield, Knight Heir Neveos. So short term, maybe we can play some sort of Azorius Knight deck with Dion, where this comes down, adds a bunch of power to the battlefield, sends all your Invasion of Phyrexia tokens to the air, and you just one-shot kill your opponent. The good news is, even after rotation, we actually have a lot of knights in Standard. Thanks to Lord of the Rings, we got cards like Cecil, we got Basri, Werefox Bodyguard's a knight, Midnight Reaper's a knight, Elenda from Foundations is a knight, Virtual Loyalty makes a knight, really good in a knight style deck. So maybe we have some sort of black-white knight deck even after rotation. The other possibility, and this is more of a stretch, but maybe this card is just good enough as a generic mono white card. Like, the more I think about this card, and in Standard, again, I'm just ignoring the backside because I don't think it's really hardly ever going to be worth trying to flip it, but a 4-drop that makes 5 power in 2 bodies and half the time is going to have flying, that might just be a good enough 4-drop if you're playing especially like Elspeth to double the tokens. It seems like it could just be a generic white card as well. So going to be at its best in knights, but it's kind of an army in the can since it makes a knight. tonight, so maybe you could just see playing white aggro. Once you get back to Commander, I think this is the new best mono white knight commander. If you look at knights in Commander, the most popular mono white knight commanders are Adeline and Quaidi, but neither of these actually actively care about knights. So I feel like if you want to build the white knight deck in Commander, Dion's probably going to be your commander. The other place I'm excited about this card is in the 99 of essentially any knight deck. If you're playing Knight Tribal, this card seems absurd to me. It's kind of like a way cheaper but way worse Moonshaker Cavalry. Moonshaker Cavalry comes down, pumps your team a ton, and gives it flying until end of turn. Dion doesn't do the team pumping, but it's half the mana cost. In a knight deck, if you can just flood the board with knights, I can imagine you playing Dion, just giving your entire team flying, and one shot killing at least one opponent. So if you're playing Sidar Jabari, or Ariel, or Elenda Nazar, or Hytham Kenway, any of these decks, Dion's going to be one of the first cards I add. I think it's a great knight card. So Dion, I actually like this card quite a bit. I think it could see standard play. I'm excited to try to build knights with it. We'll see. Going back to Circle of Loyalty, knights have always burned me. I remember Circle of Loyalty. I really thought knights were going to be good in Eldraine, but it turned out that Eldraine standard was just so busted and so powerful that knights never really had a chance. And we're in a pretty powerful and fast and busted standard right now. So we'll have to see if the meta allows knights to actually be good. But I think if the meta allows knights to be good, Dion is probably part of that. Worst case, super cool Knight Commander, good card in the 99 for Knight decks. We also got one more Final Fantasy Through the Ages card in Thraxios Scourge of Krug. This one, not especially playable, but the art's pretty cool at least. In the realm of lower rarity cards, we kick things off today with our exclusive MTG Goldfish preview card. So thank you to Wizards for hooking us up with a free preview. And I actually wrote a whole article on Restoration Magic, so check that out if you want an in-depth explanation. But Restoration Magic, a 1 mana instant, but it's a tiered card, so we can add some mana to it to get a better effect. So for 1 mana, we get target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible in the end of turn. For 2 mana, we can go up to Kira and target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and we gain 3 life. And then we can get for 5 mana, Karaga, which is permanents we control. All of them get hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and we gain 6 life. So Restoration Magic, just a random uncommon, but a pretty interesting card that could have some uses. So assuming we're just casting this for 1 mana, it kind of compares to Lauren's Escape, Blacksmith Skill, and Modern, these 1 mana save a thing effects. And honestly, in some ways Restoration Magic is the best of these effects for 1 mana, just because it can target any permanent. So if our opponent goes to blow up a land or whatever, an artifact, an enchantment, and a creature, it doesn't matter. Restoration Magic's going to be able to save it. Right now in Standard, we do have a green card that kind of does the same thing in Defend the Rider, but once Lauren's Escape rotates this summer, White doesn't really have a version of this effect, and even though Defend the Rider and these effects, Lauren's Escape, aren't really seeing play right now, we've certainly seen in the past decks that really care about protecting 1 creature, 1 permanent, play these cards in competitive decks. So even though I don't think this card shows up in the meta immediately, I would not be surprised if at some point in its 3 years in Standard that we actually get a deck that wants to play Restoration Magic. And then if we actually spend more mana on this, the Cura mode, the 2 mana mode, that's just like, I got some extra mana, so I might as well protect my thing and gain 3 life. The more exciting mode is actually the 5 mana mode, the last mode. So 5 mana to give your entire board hexproof and indestructible is honestly a lot, right? Compared to Heroic Intervention, does it for 2 mana, Dawn's Truce, does it for 2 mana, and giving your opponent a card. But you do get a Nourish out of it, you do get to gain 6 life, and I think that's mostly an upside. I think you play this card expecting to cast it for 1 mana, but then there's going to be situations where the game goes long, and your opponent casts a Wrath or something, and you're just like, I got 5 mana, I might as well gain some life, protect my entire board. So the flexibility is a big upside here. As I mentioned before, we've seen effects like this see play in the past. Like, think of some of the Venerated Rot Priest decks that we've seen in Standard, where you just want to play Venerated Rot Priest and protect Venerated Rot Priest, plus Rot Priest wants to be targeted by spells to give your opponent poison counters. This is the exact kind of deck that would want Restoration Magic, or like Light Paws. We've seen in the past Light Paws. It's this 2 mana threat that if you stick it for like even 2 turns, it should be able to win you the game. The problem is it's a huge target for removal. So in a Light Paws style deck, where you just really got to make sure Light Paws lives, something like Restoration Magic can be very, very strong. We don't really have a deck like this in our current meta, but as I said before, we definitely could have a deck at some point while this card's in Standard, and then Restoration Magic will probably be the go-to for that effect. I can even imagine if you're looking for some short-term play, maybe like Boros Mice could play this. Boros Mice, definitely not the most popular build of Mice, but Boros Mice, you get sheltered by ghosts, you trigger Valiant if you cast Restoration Magic, plus if you can stick your Manifold Mouse, your Heartfire Hero, they are going to win the game really, really quickly. So I could see this being maybe like a sideboard card for a Boros Mice style deck. Once you get back to Commander, this is a card that I wouldn't play in every deck. I would play this in any deck where the 1 mana mode is good. As I mentioned before, 5 mana to protect your whole board, that's just a little expensive compared to the other options. So I think you need to be planning to cast this for 1 mana. And then the 5 mana mode is just like a bonus that you get to take advantage of sometimes. But there are certain Commander decks that are really going to want this card. First one I thought of is Feather. Feather wants all these protection spells because you got to keep Feather alive, plus it's going to keep bouncing back to your hand. As the game goes longer, you can start casting it for more mana to gain life, maybe protect other things. We already talked about Light Paws, but the same thing's true in Commander. That is just another way to keep Light Paws on the battlefield. Sergeant John Ben, any sort of like Voltron-y style Commander, where you're like, if I can stick my Commander, I'm going to win the game, and you're in white, then I think Restoration Magic is kind of just a staple in those decks. On the other hand, as I said before, I don't think you play this with the intention of using the 5 mana mode to save your entire board. If you're in Wrath Protection mode, Teferi's Protection is just better. Clever Concealment's just better. Galadriel's Dismissal, probably just better. So there's a bunch of other options that are better at saving your board. Although I will point out that some of these cards are kind of expensive. So I could see Restoration Magic kind of being like super budget T-Pro. Since it's only an uncommon, it shouldn't be too pricey. And then this is like a not as good, but still a fine way to protect your board. Plus you get the flexibility of being able to cast it earlier. So Restoration Magic, I really like this card. Right now, we're kind of in wait-and-see mode in Standard. I think it is certainly good enough to be Standard playable. We just don't really have a deck that wants it right now, but I think that could definitely change in the future. In Commander, the card's really good in Voltron-style decks, and I think maybe a nice budget replacement for stuff like Teferi's Protection and Clever Concealment. We also got a new Super Charm in Battle Menu. So Battle Menu, a 2-mana white instant. You get to choose one of 4 options, which are create a 2/2 white knight creature token. Target creature gets +0/+4 until end of turn. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, or you gain 4 life. When you add all this together, I feel like Battle Menu seems like a pretty good card. If you want comparisons for the effect, the baseline is you get an instant speed Grizzly Bear, an instant speed 2/2, which is not above the curve in 2025, but it's not bad. It's essentially the adventure mode on Virtual Loyalty, which has been a pretty good card at various points in Standard. Target creature gets +0/+4, probably the weakest mode on this card. That's Iron Will, a 1-mana card, although situationally, there will be times when your opponent goes to Burst Lightning your important creature, and you can play that to save it or whatever. You attack, and your opponent thinks they have good blocks, and you can play this to keep a creature alive. So there are situations where it's still going to be fine. The other mode that's actually pretty efficient is the Destroy Target Creature Power 4 or greater. We have Repel Calamity in Standard right now, which is kind of the same thing. I guess it's power or toughness 4 or greater, so slightly better, but really 2 mana is kind of the baseline price that you would pay to blow up a big creature. And then the gain 4, I guess it's sort of like Blessed Alliance, which actually might not be the worst comparison for this card, is an effect that can gain you life, it can be removal. So I think that Battle Menu, I'm not sure there's any deck in current Standard that would main deck it, although we were just talking about Knights earlier, and this goes way up in value if you actually care about the creature type of the token that you make. If I'm playing a Knight deck, then I think this could be main deckable, right? Like, its baseline is, you make a Knight, not exciting, but it works with the synergies and the theme of your deck, and then you also get some removal, you get some life gain against aggro, maybe some creature buffing, toughness buffing for some reason. So in Knights, it seems like it could be main deckable. Otherwise, I feel like this is just a really solid sideboard card. The 2/2 Knight is, in a weird way, in some matchups, kind of like early game removal. You can flash this in, maybe eat an attacking creature. The magic mode, destroy a big creature, is really good in the late game, plus gaining some life is never bad. So I would not be surprised to see this card show up in Standard. We've seen in the past that these charm style effects, where you get a ton of different options, they tend to be really good thanks to their flexibility, even if they aren't especially efficient. And honestly, at least half the modes on this card are kind of pretty pretty efficient. They're the price that you would pay if it wasn't a charm with all this flexibility, which makes me think that Battle Menu, probably a pretty good card. Finally today, we get a bunch of Draft Jeff you can check out over at MTGPreviews.com. Combat tutorial kind of cracks me up. 2-mana sorcery, target player draws 2 cards, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. It is an upgraded divination. The problem is, we're in a stock up standard, and compared to stock up, this card just does not look very good, so I don't think it's gonna make it because we can play stock up instead. Eject is also kind of a neat card, being able to bounce a non-land permanent and draw a card. The problem is, for 4 mana, it's just a bit too much, even with the can't be countered mode. Anyway, you can check it all out over at MTGPreviews.com, and that brings us to the end of our daily Final Fantasy spoilers for today. So, what do you think about today's cards? What do you think of our exclusive preview card? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more Final Fantasy spoilers. So until then, have an amazing day, everyone, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more magic? Well, check out yesterday's Against the Odds, where we did some Throne of the God Pharaoh in Standard. And of course, you can find our last spoiler video right here.